Welcome back, everyone. So, where we left off in my series of all the cars I've owned, I had purchased a 2006 Nissan Murano used. It had somewhere in the mid to low 60,000 mile range. And it was black on black. It was a nice vehicle, all-wheel drive. I loved the way it drove. I loved really everything about it, but what I didn't love was the constant barrage of parts and repairs that it required and the high cost of service when it needed it. I mean, for example, the transmission service on one of those Muranos was about $500, which is a little much. But this was back in the days when only the dealer would service them. Now you can pretty much get it done anywhere in a CVT. But it also had some very unfortunate engineering shortfalls, not just in the CVT, but the seat frames would collapse in them, the transfer cases would explode catastrophically. They just had a lot of problems. The timing chains were a weak spot. They were just they were a vehicle that you would typically just lease for 3 years and dump, and that's what they are, and that's all they are. I would not recommend somebody buy or lease one because I've had a bad experience. And the Nissan Murano was my last Nissan, the last one I'll ever buy. I'll never buy another one. And that's not because I had a bad experience with that one vehicle. It was because I saw a declining, a trend in Nissan's overall quality rating and consumer satisfaction. The trend has been dropping or curving downward ever since Carlos Ghosn took over the company, and I don't see it going up anytime soon. The problem is Nissan started to cut costs any way they could to maintain profitability. And that comes at a cost. Because customers who buy your products or have been buying their products for many years, they've come to expect a certain level of quality, performance, and value retention. And when you start dumping products in the market that don't hold up to those standards, those customers will notice and they'll start looking elsewhere. Now, I was a person who was all set for buying Nissans for life and just buy a new one every couple of years as my needs change or my situation differs and as my finances allow. And that was my plan. I was going to continue buying Nissans. I was a loyal customer. And I am I'm a very loyal brand. I'm brand loyal in a lot of ways. For example, I've been buying Duracell batteries since I was 6 years old. I still buy Duracell batteries. I'm loyal to certain brands in many ways, and I was going to be a Nissan man for life. But unfortunately, the company has just gone to hell, and I'll never touch another one. I know Subaru owners who still buy Subarus despite the fact that they blow head gaskets on a regular basis or they suffer catastrophic engine failures, and yet they're still loyal to their Subarus because the Subaru product line offers something that has never changed. The cars are fun to drive and they go anywhere, they do anything you want them to do, and they're just good vehicles overall. But they have an Achilles heel, and that comes in the form of engines. They can't build an engine to save their lives anymore. Somehow they forgot how to make engines. I don't know how that works, but that's just one example. I mean, I was willing to accept Nissan's CVT transition, but when a CVT transmission costs half what a vehicle is worth to replace or more, and you couple that with all the other issues I had with that Murano. For example, I had all of the pending issues that they were known for. They were just starting to rear their heads when I had the car after about a year or two. The timing chains were making noise. which is a precursor to failure. The CVT was acting up, which is another precursor to a catastrophic failure. The transfer case was making a grinding noise when you were just rolling down the street. And all of these things just got me to thinking that maybe Nissan was just headed down the wrong road. So I decided it's time for a new brand. It's time to change brands, get something else from somebody else. So I thought of the options that I had on the table. Now, Subaru was doing really well in 2011 or 2010 when I was looking. I decided I was going to look. So I went to a couple of dealers and I looked at some Toyotas. I didn't like them. I drove a Toyota Corolla and I hated it. I hated it. It just, something about it didn't feel right to me. I don't know what it was. It's the strangest thing. I ended up at a Hyundai dealership, of all places, and I remember Hyundais from the past, and I never, ever, ever thought I would buy one. My grandmother actually owned Hyundais for her last two vehicles before she passed. In 1993, she bought herself a brand new Hyundai Excel, stripper model, absolutely no options. No AC. It had no radio, it had a 4-speed manual. You gotta bless her. My grandmother drove stick shifts, and she was a terrible driver. But so she was very hard on her cars, but she knew how to drive a stick shift, which is cool. But anyway, it was a 4-speed manual. I think it had cloth interior. That was standard on those, though. It had cloth interior. It was gold on beige. So it was the automotive equivalent of a snooze button. Gold paint with beige interior. It was, and she smoked so much. She smoked so bad that by the time she got rid of that car, the interior was like brown. It was brown. It was now a gold car with brown interior. It was disgusting. God bless you, Grandma. I miss you. I miss her so much. Anyway, so she bought the car new in '93. She paid about $5,000 or $6,000 for it, brand new. And wouldn't you know it, that turned out to be the best car she had ever owned in her life. It was reliable. Oh, well, but that, besides the Studebaker she had back when my mom was born, she owned a Studebaker, I don't remember what model it was, but she had, I think it was a Lark, a Studebaker Lark. But anyway, it turned out to be the most reliable car she'd ever owned. It was the most fuel efficient, it was reliable, and she drove that thing for 85,000 miles. She had it from 1993 to 2002. Or was it 03? I think she had it up until 03, I believe. And in 2003, the transmission locked up on her way to work, and after towing it to a shop, they looked it over and they said, well, here's your problem. Somebody had a parking lot barrier and all the oil leaked out of the transmission. So you need a transmission. And as it turns out, it was my uncle who did it, and he never told anybody. And the car drove for like a month after this happened, when he hit a barrier. See, he used to use her car all the time because he couldn't afford to keep his own car on the road, and that's his fault, nobody else's. Regardless of what he said. Anyway. So the transmission was shot. Now, I actually thought about buying the car from her when I was 16. I was about 16 when it happened, or 17. And I considered buying the car from her and putting a transmission in it because I know she took care of it. She kept the oil changed, and my dad did a timing belt on it at one point. And it only had 84,000 miles on it. I could have had the car for nothing and just put a transmission in and it'd be all set to go. That would have been my first road legal car, actually. But ultimately, I decided not to do that. She ended up buying another Hyundai. She bought a 2001 Elantra. She bought it used, and she drove that car until she couldn't drive anymore, and she ended up in a nursing home. But and that was a great car too. I actually drove both vehicles. The 93 the 93 Accent, it drove like a go-kart, and being it only a 4-speed, it needed another gear. I mean, this thing be tacking. Oh, it had no tachometer either, so you never knew how fast the engine was going. You just listened to it and try to guess. But I guessed it was tacking at about 12,000 RPM at about 40 miles an hour. At least that's what it felt like. Yeah, about 12,000 RPM. I'm like, Grandma, is this thing a rotary or what? She didn't get the joke. Anyway, so that car got scrapped. She bought the used Elantra, and so I ended up putting my Volkswagen on the road, and that's where we started off in this series. But anyway, I never thought for a minute that I would own a Hyundai product, and I never took them seriously. I just always found them to be ugly, and they just had that, as Jeremy Clarkson so eloquently put it, they just looked Korean. You could look at a Hyundai and you're like, yep, that's a Korean car. And they just had this cartoonish, the proportions were always they just didn't look right. So anyway, I went to the Hyundai dealership with my Murano, and I told the guy, I just want something simple. And I'm looking at an Accent, and he showed me a couple. He had a blue one, an orange one, and I like the orange one. I like the color. Orange is a color that you just don't see very much. It stands out. So I was going to do a test drive in the orange Accent, which had it was a step up from base. It had power windows. It had a stick shift. Nice little car. I think the price on that was about 17 grand, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. And he had a powder blue one in the showroom, but that one had all the dealership add-ons where they bring it. So a little thing that you should know is dealerships will do this. They'll buy the ultra base models from the manufacturer, or they'll get them in their floor plan. And what they do with these cars is sacrilegious. They send them over to a shop that does nothing but tax on dealer add-ons. So they'll take a strippy, super base model Elantra, Accent, or whatever car you're talking about, whatever kind of dealer it is, and they'll add a sunroof. They'll add a navigation system. Sometimes they put custom wheels on them. Another thing that they've been known to do is they'll take the factory alloy wheels and they'll plate them in chrome, which is, you don't want that. You don't want that. They'll put mud guards, pinstriping, side graphics, all that stuff. They'll sell it to the dealer. They'll sell all those add-ons to the dealer for, let's say, I don't know, $500. The dealer turns around and sells the car for an extra $1,000 or $1,200 or whatever. They make a lot of profit on these. So they take a low-end vehicle and they just jack the profit. And then they'll put on their fabric protection. Or the car will have leather interior. They'll do that too. They'll take a strippy cloth interior equipped car and they'll put leather in it. The quality of these conversion jobs is always all over the map. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not, depending on who did the work. So they had one of those in the lot, and I'm like, no, I don't want that. There's no way I'm going to pay Sonata money for an Accent. I don't care how much leather's in there. So, anyway, he told me that because it was the end of the 2010 model year, he had a whole bunch of Elantras, and he showed me a list of all the ones he had on the lot. He's like, I need to get these off the lot, so would you like to look at one? We'll give you a great deal. I said, you know what? The Elantra's a bigger car, it's a more comfortable car, it's got more, same basic options though, as the Accent, but it's bigger. I bought he brought out a Regatta Blue 2010 Elantra. This one had standard GLS options, power windows, power door locks, AM/FM CD with iPod interface. It had, let's see, it had the optional mud guards. Actually, I had them put those on. But I drove it, I liked it, and it was back to basics. It was a very basic car. It was all I needed. It was all I needed. And I rather liked driving it. It was a fun car to drive. I mean, it really wasn't fun. It was an Elantra, but it was a great car for me at the time. It got me out of a loan that was a bad deal. I kept the car for 4 years. I paid it off, and I had a few warranty claims, though, and that's what we're going to talk about next. So, this particular car, it had a known issue. There was a known defect in the transmissions in this particular model year. What would happen is it would manifest in a few ways. The car would drive fine, but occasionally it would slam into second gear when you were taking off from a cold stop. It would also slam into reverse. Reverse engagement was either delayed or harsh. First to second was almost always harsh. Second to third, depending on the severity of the problem, sometimes even second to third would be a little bit harsh. And the first time it happened was actually when I drove it off the lot after buying it. I drove it off the lot and I noticed it was doing that. But it didn't get any worse. I just figured it's going to get better before it gets, it's not going to be maybe it's just part of the whole learning break-in process or something. I ended up driving the car like that for about 15,000 miles, and eventually it just got so bad that I am like, I got to bring this in. So I brought it to the dealer, and they looked at it, they said, yep, you need a transmission. So I'm like, okay. They said, here's your rental car. They handed me a set of keys to a 2011 Santa Fe that was brand new, fresh off the truck. So I drove that for a day. Came back, car was ready, new transmission, and I drove it, drove it like that for a while. It was perfect, like better than new. So I'm thinking, okay, I've got this problem in the bag. So at about 40,000 miles, it started happening again. And I'm like, well, that sucks. But guess what? I've got a warranty, so I'm going to bring it back. And I did. This time they said, yep, your transmission's junk. We're going to give you a new transmission, courtesy of Hyundai North America. Here are the keys to a 2000, would have been like a 2012 Chrysler 200 rental. Okay, great. So I drove the rental for a day. I came back, and they gave me my keys back. Good, new transmission. Have a nice day. And that was pretty much the worst of it, really. So then I started. What happened next? So I'd had the timing belt done. I was going to do it myself, but my condo association absolutely forbids doing repairs on site. And as a board member, I had to set an example. So I didn't do the timing belt myself. I brought it to the dealer, actually. They charged me $400, which wasn't too bad. It was less than I was expecting. They did the timing belt, and I said, while you're in there, do this, this, and this. And they said, you really don't need to. I said, I want to do a water pump. They said, don't worry about it. The pump's going to last. Don't worry about it. Okay. So it turns out I never had an issue with either the tensioner or the water pump. But I mean, I've never seen a mechanic turn down extra money. But I guess they know their shit. So anyway, I had another warranty claim for the LED inside the HVAC control panel. One of them burned out or failed, and that was for like the fan speed switch. So they replaced the whole thing, no charge. And I had one other warranty claim for a valve cover gasket. At 60,000 miles, I did plugs, as the service manual stated. So I did new plugs and new wires. It has it had a coil pack off to the side of the motor and little short wires. So I did that. But I noticed that there was oil in the plug wells. So in one of them. So no questions asked. I brought it in. They put in a new valve cover gasket, which was nice. No flack. They didn't chastise me for doing my own plugs. They just did it. No big deal. And one of the things that I noticed about this particular dealer is that they were very easy to deal with. They never tried to pull the wool over my eyes. One time I got a call. I was in there for something. I think it was an oil change. And they said, "Oh, by the way, there is a service bulletin on these cars that the rear axle beam, they were known for rust, and they said Hyundai will have it undercoated at no extra charge." And I'm like, and I had never found this bulletin. I had never seen any warranty or recall or anything on this. But they, for no charge, they sprayed the whole rear half of the car with undercoating for me. And it was a thick tar-like substance, the good stuff. I thought that was very nice of them to do that, because they didn't have to do it. It wasn't something that I got a letter in the mail for. They just did it while I was there. No big deal. Which is like, okay, cool. I had one, in the time I owned that car, I had it for 92,000 miles. In the time I owned it, I had one out of pocket expense for a major repair. I went to get it inspected in May, and that's when we do it in our birth month in New Hampshire. So I had it inspected, and it turns out the front lower control arms, the front bushing, there's a front and rear position. The front position bushings were shredding. They were just falling apart. And they told me that I had to fix it. I mean, it was like, this is not going to pass, you've got to fix it. And they were going to charge me, I think it was $400 per side or something. It was a lot of money. I'm like, I'm not gonna do that. Because if I had the dealer do it, they were charging me to press out the old bushings and put new ones in. I'm not going to do that. So I did some homework, and I found out that there was a parts supplier online that buys parts directly from the manufacturer. It wasn't through a dealer. Hyundai has their own parts supplier in-house. It's called Hyundai Mobis. And as it turns out, when I would order the part, so I ordered 2 control arms, left and right, from this supplier. I forget which one it was. But the parts that showed up in the mail were from Hyundai directly. So I got factory parts for the price of aftermarket parts, which is really cool. I think the whole, and I also put in new ball joints while I was there. I ordered a set of ball joints for it. So I didn't need them, but while in Rome, I think I did the whole job for like $200, a fraction of what the dealer was going to charge, and it took me about an hour per side in my parents' driveway. It's actually a very easy repair, tearing out the lower control arms and putting new ones in. And what I did with that is I took the new control arms and I coated them thoroughly with rust proofing before I put them in, because they're known to rust on those cars as well. So that was taken care of. But the car was what it was. If it snowed heavily, I just called out of work, took out a vacation day. I get a lot of vacation day, a lot of vacation time with my job, so it wasn't a big deal. It was actually kind of nice, stay at home and just get some stuff done around the house, and then when the plows come, I can drive to work. No big deal. The car was terrific in snow, though. I put some nice, inexpensive snow tires on there. That car is one of the best cars I've ever owned for driving in the snow. It was just, it just had the perfect weight distribution. One story I have about that. So I lived in a fairly rural mountain community. I lived near a ski resort, and so I was like way up there. So there was one leg of my journey from work to my house where it was like a fairly steep incline for about a mile or so. And then it kind of tapered off, and then there was another incline. There was one snowstorm. I come home from work and it's snowing pretty bad, and I was coming through the town where that hill is, and there was a police officer stopping people, saying, if there's any other way you can get home, you need to go that way. But for me, I had no other way. This was like the only way home, and all other roads were either blocked or worse off than this one. So I'm like, thank you for letting me know, officer, but I've got to get home, and this is the only way I can get there. So he said, well, just so you know, up on the top, like up that hill, we have a ramp truck that was trying to rescue a van, and they're both stranded. They're both trapped. We've got another car, like an SUV, that was trapped. They couldn't get up. And so best of luck to you. Just don't get stuck. So I said, well, I got to take my chances. So I'm not, there was no other place for me to go. I had to get home. So anyway, I put the car in first gear. Actually, no, second gear. I put it in second gear, which lowers the torque output. And then once the wheels start to slip, you just let off the gas, if they do. So I started driving up the hill. I could tell that it was slippery. The snow was piling up. It was a mess. So as I'm driving up the hill, I'm waving at the tow truck, I'm waving at the van, I'm waving at the SUV, and here I am in a shitbox Hyundai going up this steep hill in the snow with Chinese snow tires, just having a good time. I made it home that night, no problem, no issues. I really love that car for what it was. When you're expecting a bargain basement experience and it exceeds that, you tend to be much happier with the vehicle than if you buy something expensive and it lets you down time and time again. And it's those underdog cars that I love so very much. And it was my ownership experience with that 2010 Elantra that got me to buy 2 more Hyundais after that. And I've loved every one of them. I have had no issues that I can really complain about. This particular 2010 Elantra, though, it did have transmission issues from day one to the last day I owned it. I had 2 replacements, and the final replacement was starting to develop the same issues by the 92,000 mile mark. And I had done some more homework, and I found that Hyundai no longer used these 4-speed transmissions, and they were problematic. They've begun building their own transmissions in-house, and they've abandoned the Mitsubishi design completely. Because some of you might realize that Hyundai did use Mitsubishi transmissions in a lot of their cars at one point. Because Mitsubishi and Hyundai were once like this. But those days are over. They're making their own transmissions and they're kicking ass. I still own a Hyundai as a daily driver, and I don't think I'll drive anything else. Every automaker has their own unique problems. Mazda has their problems, and Toyota's got theirs. Subaru has their problems, and they're well known and documented. I've never considered buying an American car because I don't like them. I just don't. I've ridden in them, I've driven them, I've driven a lot of different makes and models, and I just don't like them. I don't like the way they look, I don't like the way they drive. And they seem to be always having problems that end up making national news. Ford with their dual clutch transmission woes, and General Motors with their inability to turn a profit because of bloated labor costs. And just unappealing cars overall. So, I hope this video has been somewhat informative and entertaining, but it's a video that I've had a hard time making because there's just so many things I want to talk about with this particular car, because I had never owned a vehicle for 4 years until I bought this one. It was a major shift in my purchasing habits. And it was bought out of desperation. I had to get rid of one vehicle and get into another one as quickly as possible. And this is how I did it. Anyway, thank you for watching, and have a great night, or day, depending on when you watch the video.